my apartment was, I walked out of it and turned right, and I was at the south end of Central Park on 6th Avenue. I could walk down 6th Avenue to the Sirius XM studios. On the way, I would pass the Museum of Modern Art. I'd go over a couple of streets, and there's Broadway. It was walking distance, and all of the Radio City Music Hall was right on my walk to the studios. So all of that stuff was there, and I took advantage of that. It was really interesting, and I enjoyed it.
And that's the voice of TV news anchor, radio personality, and author Mike Hambrick. And last time he was giving us a summary of his career that began when he was a teenager. And looking back on your radio career, who are some disc jockeys that you got to work with that a lot of people know about, either at FM 100 or WSLR Cleveland, or even the San Juan station? Well,
the three key guys at FM 100 were Mike Powell and John Scott and Greg Hamilton. At WSLR, there was a really popular morning drive, and that was a country station. Mm-hmm. His air name was Jay Bird. I can't remember his real name, but he was an institution in the Cleveland market. Was very well known and a very strong country personality sort of guy. There was the guy who was the general manager of the radio station that hired me in San Juan, WVMJ. His name was Bob Bennett, and he was a fairly successful and well-known disc jockey in New York. I don't know if he worked for WABC or WMAQ. I can't remember, but he worked for the major top 40 stations in New York. But I guess those are the, and I did work as I said. A friend of mine who was is a radio executive, Tim Sabian. He was responsible for syndicating Howard Stern's program when he was on terrestrial radio, and then he put together the channels and Howard 100 and Howard 101 on Sirius XM in New York. Tim programmed those channels, and he was the driving force of the Howard 100 channels. And I'd known Tim for a long while, and I was in Austin visiting my older brother, John, and I get a call from Sabi saying, "What are you doing?" And I told him, well, I wasn't doing a whole lot. I wasn't, saving the world or setting the world on fire, just kind of hanging out and having a good time. And he said, well, why don't you come up to New York? And I said, well, for what? And he said, I was certainly aware of who Howard Stern was. Mm-hmm. I mean, you can't be in the industry and not know who he was. But I never was a fan or a devotee of Howard. And he even worked in some station in markets where I worked, Washington. He was in Washington for a while.
That's right. Yeah.
But he said, well, come up and talk with Howard. And I really did say, Howard who? Because he kind of caught me off guard, really. And he said, Stern, you idiot.
Well, there's also Howard Clark that was on in San Francisco, the Big 610 KFRC, so that could have been that. Could have been him.
Yeah. I mean, I had no idea. And Howard had a news department that was, and as it turned out, I did go up and talk with them, and they offered me the job to anchor the Howard 100 News. And it was unusual in that the format for it was news that was totally Howard Stern centric. It was only news about what was going on in Howard's world. And I said, okay, well, I get that, and I'm not a comedian. as such. So the best that I think I can do that program is with my tongue firmly planted in my cheek. I'll deliver the Howard 100 News like it's Walter Cronkite in the CBS Evening News. In other words, deal with all that crazy news in a straight news fashion. And they said, oh, okay, we'll do that. So that's what we did. While I was there, Howard had his 60th birthday, which was a major event in the Howard world, and he had a live Howard Stern birthday bash in one of the historic venues in Washington, and I anchored. They said, "Well, how do we want to do this from a news fashion?" And this is a huge auditorium, and he's got all kinds of A-list people there, and he's there on stage, and there's music, and a lot of A-list people in the audience and all that. So I said, well, let's treat it like it's a political convention, and we'll have our reporters down on the floor of the birthday bash, getting updates and talking to people and doing all that. So we did 2 hours of that before the Howard's 2 hours of birthday bash, and then we did the 2-hour live birthday bash post show. So that was kind of fun and unique, I guess. Certainly in my experience, it was.
Yeah.
So, and I'd always wanted. I was in and out of New York working for NBC, and I'd always wanted to live in New York and experience that. So I had a really nice apartment on West 58th Street and 6th Avenue, and got to do everything I wanted to do while I was in New York. And about the time I was ready to think, okay, I still had a place outside of D.C. where I lived, so I was going back on the weekends ever so often. But Howard just woke up one morning and decided that he didn't want a traditional news department anymore, and so that was the end of that experience. But it was fine. It was about I was about ready to leave New York. I would not want to live in New York on a full-time basis, for sure.
What were your favorite parts about New York City? What did you like the most about New York?
Well, it was pretty individual to me. One of the TV news anchor jobs I had was in New Haven, Connecticut, and they had what was then the news consultants, and they kind of ruled the day. But the management there and the consultants, and I was the main anchor for the station in Hartford, New Haven, which was, I think, a top 20 market at the time, and I was 26 years old or something, right? So they wanted me to go to TV news anchor coach, if you would, and her name was, and I did, and her name was Lilyan Wilder, and she had an unusual method for teaching communication as an anchor. She was an actress, and she had taught at the Actors Studio, Lee Strasberg's Actors Studio in New York, which is a very famous actors school. A lot of the people that you see today went through Lee Strasberg's Actors Studio. De Niro did, Pacino did, Paul Newman did, way back Marilyn Monroe did. A lot of people did. So she incorporated, and the method acting principles, and it was called the method acting. Marlon Brando was there as well. The method acting principles were based on a Russian actor and director, Stanislavski. Strasberg incorporated the Stanislavski method acting principles, and that's what his discipline was. So Lilyan came up with a way to kind of marry communicating as a TV news anchor and the method acting principles. I say all that because it was an interesting process, but while I was being coached by Lilyan, she said that she was very complimentary, and it was very good for me, as far as taking my communication skills to the next level. She indicated that I should try to audition for to be accepted at the Actors Studio as an actor, and it's something I really did want to do at the time, but I just had been married for a little over a year, and was expecting my first child, first daughter. Mm-hmm. So I didn't think I could be a starving actor with a wife and a daughter in New York.
Yeah.
Right? So I decided I wouldn't do that. But I always wanted to go back to involve myself in that. And so living in New York, I didn't go to the Actors Studio, but I went to a couple of other really well-known studios in New York, and did some training there. So that was one thing. I enjoyed my apartment was. I walked out of it and turned right, and I was at the south end of Central Park on 6th Avenue.
Wow!
So that was convenient. I could walk down 6th Avenue to the Sirius XM studios. On the way, I would pass the Museum of Modern Art. I'd go over a couple of streets, and there's Broadway. I mean, I was walking distance, and all of the Radio City Music Hall was right on my walk to the studios. So all of that stuff was there, and I took advantage of that. It was really interesting, and I enjoyed it.
That's great. And New York City is known for its pizza. What was your favorite pizza place there?
I'm not a big pizza fan,
but
so I don't think I have a favorite pizza place.
Oh, okay.
There was a little really nice, but it's an Italian restaurant right up the street from me. That was kind of, you walk in, it was kind of walking into the Twilight Zone, a time warp kind of thing, in its ambiance and its cachet. And the piano player there was a really interesting guy. He was 98 years old, and he had arthritis in his hands and his fingers, but it was amazing, Josh. This guy, even with fingers that were gnarled like that, he could play classical music, Broadway hits, pop music, jazz, anything you want, he could play. So it was a real treat to go and it was very convenient. So I spent a lot of time there. There was a couple of steakhouses right next door to where my apartment was. That was kind of neat. And there was when my Victor's was a restaurant that was Cuban food. And it was really good. And I'd gone there years before with my brother. My oldest brother was anchoring the news at WNBC in New York. So I went back there and kind of reminisced there. So it was fine. It was just New York's New York. It's the city that never sleeps. That's for sure.
Oh yeah. What was the name of that Italian restaurant by chance that had that 98-year-old piano player?
Yeah, I'd have to go back and check. It was something like Giovanni's or something like that. It was an Italian name. I'd have to check it out and see. The piano player has long since passed.
Yeah,
but who was there?
It's kind of funny. There's in Southern California. There's a place called the Moonlight Roller Rink in Glendale, where I live, and the owner of the place, they actually have an organ there. And sometimes instead of playing, contemporary hit music, they'll play organ music, and it's really cool. And you even have young people out there skating to the organ music.
I can remember that as a kid in skating rinks. Yeah, that they would play organ. I'd forgotten about that, but yeah, they would play, the rock and roll music as well. But I can remember organ playing. I'll tell you, and this certainly ages me, but I grew up in small East Texas oil field towns, but we were always like within commuting distance of Dallas, and I had some of my mother's relatives lived in Dallas. So when I would visit, I would go to movies as a kid, and this was back when the theaters were the only places you could see movies, right? Mm-hmm. There were no DVDs, there was no cable channels or any of that. But it was, and they a lot of them were retrofitted music auditoriums, and I can't remember if it was the Majestic or the Grand. One or the other had a pipe organist that would be playing as you walked in and were being seated to watch a movie, whatever it might be, The Sound of Music or My Fair Lady or whatever it might be, Bullet, whatever. They would be making, the guy would be playing. It was kind of incongruous of the time, but it harkened back to a different age.
Oh yeah.
But it was kind of normal because I didn't know any difference. But organ music was played then.
This is the Talking Archive. I'm Josh Jacobs. We're speaking with radio personality and TV newscaster Mike Hambrick. And next time he shares some wonderful stories about his brothers and their careers and what happened when John and Judd Hambrick were teamed up as part of the Eyewitness News team. How did KBC TV Channel 7 market that? We'll find out that interesting story next time.